In Nuremberg, there is a trial being set up, which includes 4 countries, Great Britain, United States, Russia, and France.
Mm-hmm.
Being a law student at the Sorbonne in 1945, were you familiar with what was going on in London, for example, in 1945? Or?
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. No, I studied civil law, criminal law, constitutional law, and so on. There was no mention at all of Nuremberg. Of course, in the newspapers originally when the trial started, but no, there was no discussion at all about that.
When the trials start and there's your uncle being shown on a probably the newspaper, were you aware of his activities there at Nuremberg? Did you follow that?
No, not really, no. I tried to finish my studies. I knew that my uncle was in Nuremberg, my aunt was in Nuremberg, and others had gone, but no, my main interest in Nuremberg, besides the fact I was there a few months, is 40 years later.
So at some point in April of 1946,
mm-hmm.
there's an inquiry as to whether you might be interested. How did that come about?
Well, so I had finished my law degree with 3 years studies. I was not working. My aunt called me up and said, if your uncle would like you to come to Nuremberg to help him, because another nephew had left. So I told my aunt, no, I cannot come because I've got a Boy Scout camp. So eventually she convinced me that I better go. So I did, and well, I was called to the Place Vendôme, which is the Ministry of Justice, and given a contract with my first monthly pay. I mean, after I had worked a month, but I had a contract, and then I was put on an American military plane, with banquet, no seats like now, of course. Were attached on the side only, very, very rudimentary, but it came to Nuremberg, and then I joined the family. I joined my uncle and my aunt in a villa not far from the center of Nuremberg.
You're at Nuremberg, you drive in there the first day. What did you think of the city?
Destroyed,
yeah.
Totally destroyed. Rubbles everywhere, ruins. Hardly any. There were a few people sort of going by, but there was nothing left. It was quite this courthouse, which standing there, refurbished by the Americans, and a sort of island of American prosperity within the courthouse, with everything. I mean, everything that was needed for a trial.
At some point, you have your first meeting with your uncle, and I assume your first question is, how's it going?
No, I said, what should I do? What do you want me to do?
What did he want you to do?
Yes, so he said, well, I'd like you to take 6 or 7 defendants, and every day we get verbatim reports of testimonies, etc., in 4 languages, well, in French for that matter, and you should summarize verbatim reports on those defendants every few days. And my job was to do this summarizing, which I had never worked before. I had no idea. I was not a lawyer, really, so I was totally ignorant. And my biggest trouble was to dictate to secretaries who had 10 or 15 years older than me, impressed me, looked at me saying, is he going to be able to do it or not?
Did you have much interaction with your uncle during this period of time?
Not at all, not at all, no. No, we saw him every lunch or dinner with the family. He never asked, but he never talked about the trial itself. Talked about minor social matters. With his wife played the piano and etc. He was making jokes, but never ever would he talk about what was going on.
Were you there? Well, let's talk about Justice Jackson here. Obviously, you have your picture with him at one point. Was there any sense from your colleagues on the French side as to about Justice Jackson?
I couldn't say because I was a young, ignorant young man, but it's only later on that I knew, of course, that the whole thing was initiated by Jackson and carried out by Jackson until the end. I mean, of course, I realized that it was, I shouldn't say an American enterprise, but it was an American zone of Germany. It was all run very efficiently by American managers, besides the lawyers and everything else. The whole thing was very systematic, very well done, very well run, and it was clearly U.S. dominated, if you like, business. What struck me during my presence was Hans Frank, the Gauleiter of Poland, who was responsible for massacres and Jewish persecution, etc., where he pretended to confess and to declare that he had become a good Catholic and that he was sorry for what happened. I think I wrote a short article for that Protestant periodical about it, sort of expressing some doubts about the sincerity of his confession. Right. So I think he was properly judged and executed at the end. It's only Edgar Faure, one of the prosecutors, assistant prosecutors, who at one stage talked about the anti-Jewish laws of Vichy, therefore the responsibility of Vichy. The others hardly mentioned it. And one of the main testimonies about the concentration camps was by a communist witness who had survivor, Vaillant Couturier, who thought it's all linked. She talked about Jews being massacres, but it's all part of deportees, political deportees.
Mm-hmm. You walk in the Palace of Justice, take your position, and you are looking across and you see the 21 defendants. What do you think?
I'm impressed. I'm impressed by these very important people who are there. But of course, my vision is difficult to go back to where there was a young man looking at them. It's not. I mean, it's so extraordinary that I probably didn't really realize, but I knew who they were more or less. I mean, I learned progressively who they were. And I had read something before in newspapers about what was happening, and I don't know. I thought it was a good idea anyway to have them tried. And eventually, when I got into the verbatim reports, it was all full of crimes or accusations or defense, etc. So I got into the meat of the trial, what the trial was all about. The most spectacular, of course, was, as everybody knows, was Goering. Still plump and still arrogant, and the officers and others, and Hess, Rudolf Hess, who seemed to be lost in his thoughts. These were two of the personages who was quite spectacular.
When you concluded your activities at Nuremberg, you got a letter, and you provided a copy to you. Could you read that for us?
The undersigned, Don de Vabre and Falco, judge and alternate judge, judges at the tribunal, certify that Mr. Yves Beigbeder, law graduate, has fulfilled from April to August 1946 the functions as secretary of the judges. He has acquitted himself with care and intelligence, of the tasks which were entrusted to him, and has given all satisfaction. So I left with a light heart and produced that whenever it was necessary.
This is terrific. This is terrific.